Hello there, cats and kittens. My name is Alonda Carter, and I am the recovering Hunbot. I create anti-MLM videos, and now I'm like dipping my toe into true crime. And when you think about it, multi-level marketing, isn't it criminal? Just saying. Now, you have probably heard about Jack the Ripper, but I am going to tell you about a crime or a series of crimes that happened before Jack the Ripper. Now, in case you don't know this, I'm from Texas. As a matter of fact, when I was growing up, I spent most holidays in Austin, like Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, all that sort of stuff. My mom and I would hop in the car and drive to Austin. Now, the way we measure distance here in Texas is by time. So Austin is about 2.5 hours from Houston, and it's also located in the hill country. Now, when I was a kid, my grandparents, who weren't actually like my grandparents, they were like friends of the family. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you have that too, like aunts that aren't your aunt, but they're your aunt, sort of a thing. Anyway, they lived on 6th Street. You might be familiar with 6th Street if you're thinking about like all the bars and everything, and people from University of Texas go there. There's, lots of musicians have played along 6th Street. It's a very popular area. Well, where my grandparents lived, it wasn't in that area. It was on the other side. And I can remember, Mopac being built there. Mopac is a freeway, in case you don't know. There was also a train not too far. And what I really remember, and this still is something I still really, really like because I find it soothing. When you're a kid, the adults go and do like adult things and talk adult stuff. And so then I'd go to sleep. And when I'd go to sleep, I would hear the train whistle. And so it always just still soothes me. Anyway, let's just get on with the story, shall we? Now, before we start, I'm going to issue a warning. Just in case you're sensitive, I want you to know what you're getting into, alrighty? Warning. The following presentation is intended for mature audiences. It contains graphic descriptions of crime scenes, adult dialogue, and strong language. Viewer discretion is advised. All right, before we get into the crime and the whole story about all of that, I'm going to set the stage so you kind of know what you're getting into in terms of the time period. Now, hop into your little time machine because we're going back into the 1880s. The Republic of Texas was established October 2nd, 1835. The capital of Texas had 5 locations, the last being my hometown, Houston. At this time, agriculture dominated the economy. The main crops were cotton and corn, and urban centers were really beginning to grow. On the banks of the Colorado River, the village of Waterloo was founded. Now, in 1839, the village changed its name to honor the father of Texas, who was Stephen F. Austin. And boom, there we have the city of Austin. The government of Texas moved from Houston to Austin in October of 1839. The following January, Austin had a population of a whopping 839 people. By the 1880s, Austin was becoming a real city. Its Capitol building was advertised as the 7th wonder of the world. Now, let me backtrack a little bit because I actually lived, I guess, on the 100 block of where, when Houston was the capital of the Republic of Texas, I lived on that property. I mean, not the Capitol building per se, because that doesn't exist anymore, but I lived in the Rice Hotel. The Rice Hotel is also where John F. Kennedy stayed the night before he was assassinated. And it's like this beautiful building. Unfortunately, it was sold and some people from California bought it. And as far as I'm concerned, all the beautiful historic things that were there when I lived there, they got rid of that, so it's really kind of sad. But, it's like this really cool area of downtown Houston. Now, most of downtown Houston is not residential. It's more residential now than it has been in like many, 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 many years. But it's not like, there's like building after building after building in a row. That's, residences. It's more business than residence. All right, now back to this story that involves Austin. Now, typically when anyone is talking about the first serial killer, like ever in the world, they typically reference Jack the Ripper. However, In 1885 in Austin, there was a killer before Jack the Ripper. The person responsible for these crimes was dubbed, two different names, the Austin Axe Murderer and also the Servant Girl Annihilator. Now, the thing is, each of these murders was eerily similar, and overall, it involved someone sneaking into someone's home late at night while they're sleeping, hitting them over the head, dragging them out, and then, really bad things happened. Now, initially, no one was really that concerned about the murders. It's not like they were happy anybody was being killed, but they were labeled. Now, don't come at me. I am using words that were, like historically what I saw. These murders were labeled as Negro murders because it was happening to some servants, and they happened to not be white. They were African Americans, but I'm using what I found in my research. So just don't come at me. Just put a sock in that, okay? Now, in general, it was thought that there were some African American males who, had some sort of dispute with their girlfriend or ex-girlfriend or something like that. And so there was just kind of like this passionate type thing that was going on, I guess more like a lust murder sort of a thing. But everything changed on Christmas Eve in 1885 when two white socialites were murdered. At that time, Austinites just absolutely panicked. They didn't want to check their mail. They didn't want to ride their bikes. They really just didn't want to be out there, on the streets because there was just like some madman that was loose. Now, the thing is, at this time in history, Austin was trying to I guess kind of get on center stage because, electricity was coming, telephones, like all kinds of things were happening. So Austin wanted to look like very progressive and that, people should come there because it's the cool place to be. And so what happened was the crimes were kind of just swept under the rug. They were just trying to hush everything because what kind of publicity would that be? Why would anybody want to come to a town when, people are being offed? So the city leaders just kind of, covered it up. They just really were trying to hide what was going on. Now, what I'm going to do next is share with you, I'll go through the series of the victims. There's believed to be 8 victims, but there's also 2 that they weren't killed, but something happened to them. So maybe it's 10. I don't know. Molly Smith was the very first victim, and her death basically marked this reign of terror that happened for a year. Molly was born in Virginia, but in the 1870s, she moved to Texas. And she worked as a domestic servant, and it's thought that she traveled between Waco and Austin. Waco is north of Austin, and I know in modern days you take 35 and you go north, and you'll find signs of where to exit for Waco and stuff. And you might be familiar with, what is that show called? Where there's it's on, I can't even remember the channel, but anyway, they're redoing homes or something. So you may be familiar with Waco from that. You also may be familiar with Waco from the Branch Davidians with what happened with David Koresh. Waco is a small little place. Baylor University is located there. And just some context for you. Anyway, Molly lived with her boyfriend in a little cabin behind her employer's home. She is described as being an unmarried woman who was about 25, and she also had a 10-year-old son, and his name was George. Now, on the night of December 21st, 1884, Molly was woken up, and she was hit over the head and dragged into the backyard. When she was taken into the backyard, she was killed with an axe. Now, someone that she used to kind of have a thing with ended up being arrested, but then was let go because there was really no evidence. Okay, this brings me to, remember I told you that there are a couple of people that they weren't killed. So are they victims from the Servant Girl Annihilator, the Austin Axe Murderer? Really don't know, but I'm going to tell you about them because, it was part of what I found when I was doing research. On the night of March 19th, 1885, there were 2 Swedish servants who were attacked. Clara Strand and Christian Martinson. No. Clara Strand and Christine Martinson were attacked and injured, but like I said, they weren't killed. Not much is really known about their attack. There's really nothing really written about it. So it happened, and that's basically what we know. Okay, now this brings us to the official second victim, which was Eliza Shelley. Now, she was born in Texas in 1857. She worked for Lucian Johnson, and she had like a little cabin behind, his family home, and she lived there with her 3 children. On the night of May 7th, 1885, that's when she lost her life. Mr. Johnson woke up to Eliza just screaming, so he runs out there to see like what in the heck is going on. Well, when he found Eliza, she was no longer living, and it was evident that she had been struck with an axe. Now, supposedly, one of her children saw the person who attacked her. The child was thrown from the bed and told to be quiet. Now, bloody footprints were found around, like in the backyard. And these bloody footprints were leading away from the crime scene. Now, like Molly Smith, it was thought that there was some sort of domestic dispute, lovers having a quarrel, and it just kind of went a little bit too far. Now, someone was arrested because, those footprints, they were barefoot footprints. They weren't like shoes footprints. I don't know how to describe it anywhere else. Anyway, there were these bloody footprints, and then there was this guy who was barefooted. And because he was barefooted, he was arrested, which that's not really evidence, but okay. Now, the thing is back then, nobody realized initially that these crimes were being committed probably by a single person. They were thinking you had a dispute with someone, you had a dispute with someone. It was something like that they were separate and not connected. Irene Cross is thought to be the third victim, and she's from Mississippi. She was born in 1847. She lived with her husband, and they also had a son. His name was Washington, and they all lived together, and she also worked as a servant. Now, unfortunately, her husband passed away, and so it ended up being, just her son and herself, just trying to get by in this world and all that. Now, at the time of her death, she was living with her son and also her nephew. Her son was not home the night that she was killed, but her nephew was. She was attacked and killed on May 23rd, 1885. Now, her nephew described the person he saw as being kind of like big and chunky, and he also had his pants rolled up. Mary Ramey is the daughter of Rebecca Ramey, and she is the fourth victim in this story. She grew up on Pecan Street, and she was the baby of her family, and her family owned a little grocery store. And so she'd be there, just like all sweet and cute. And everybody just loved her because, she was the baby, and, she would greet everyone and all that. Now, her mother was a domestic servant for the Weed family, and Mary lived on the property of the Weeds along with her mom. And where they lived wasn't all that far from where Eliza lived. Now, on August 21st of 1885, in the dead of night, someone broke in and they dragged Mary out of bed. Now, when she was found, she had been raped and killed. She was also hit with an axe. Now, Mr. Weed woke up at around 5 a.m. because, he heard something. And he called 2 doctors after he found Mary, but unfortunately, they weren't able to save the girl. Which brings us to the 5th and 6th victim, which was a couple. Orange Washington and Gracie Vance lived together, and they worked for someone who was a builder in Austin. Because remember, at this time, Austin was like, just getting started. So there was a lot of things being built in the city. Orange was from Brenham. Now, you may or may not know of Brenham, and I don't know if Bluebell ice cream goes outside of Texas. Honestly, it is the best ice cream ever. The homemade vanilla, absolutely fabulous. But anyway, that's what we as Texans, we know Brenham because of Bluebell is the best ice cream in the country. Now, Gracie was born in 1865. Before she met Washington, she had been married before. Now, the 2 of them lived on the Butler property, and, their little home, little cabin, whatever. There were 4 people that slept there, and it was, behind the main house. September 28th, 1885, both of them were killed. Orange was killed in his sleep. Gracie was dragged out of the bed into the backyard where she was raped and murdered. Now, the 2 other people that were there were 2 girls that were around 17, Lucinda Bodie and Patsy Gibson. Now, Lucinda was hit over the head with a sandbag, but she eventually kind of like woke up. And so, she was like kind of like disoriented, but she found a kerosene lamp. And so she lit it. Well, out in the backyard where, Gracie was being attacked and everything, the person saw the lamp and so came back and told her to put it out. Now, people came outside, and a neighbor said that she saw someone like running from her stables because in her stables, that's where Gracie had been dragged to. Now, this brings us to the last two victims, victim 7 and victim 8. Both of these victims, unlike all the other ones, these were the two wealthy white women. And the thing is that both of these women, they were attacked like within hours of each other. Susan Hancock was born in 1840, and she was born in Alabama and then eventually moved to Texas. She lived on East Water Street with her husband Moses, and they also had 2 children. On Christmas Eve of 1885, she was knocked unconscious. She was sleeping inside one of her children's bedrooms, and she was, knocked unconscious, like I said, and then taken out into the backyard. Now, her husband woke up because there was like all of this commotion and everything. And he followed the trail of blood out into the backyard and followed it through the yard and everything. It kind of like led to a fence and just kind of like trailed off. And he thought he saw someone jumping over his fence. Now, Susan at the time wasn't yet dead. She was really, really badly wounded. But she died 3 days later on December 28th, 1885. Eula Phillips was the final victim. She was born in April of 1868. Now, Eula married this guy, James, and they got married shortly after her mother died. There had been a typhoid epidemic in this area called Onion Creek. Onion Creek is to the, south, to the south of Austin. I only know it because back when I was a kid and all of that, one of my aunts lived in an area called Onion Creek. So I'm kind of pretty thinking like, that was probably named after the Onion Creek from what we're talking about in this story. Now, Eula was not all that happy in her marriage. This was like before she was killed and everything, obviously. The thing is that her husband was drinking a lot, and he also wasn't employed. So that really wasn't sitting well with her. But then she got back together with him after he secured a job and stopped drinking. But it's thought that she did have an affair with someone. Eula's husband, James, his mother was staying with them. And so on the night that Eula was killed, his mother found James, like kind of knocked out. A neighbor came over, and there was like this bloody trail that led into the backyard. And that's where they found Eula. It was evident by just looking at her body that she had been hit over the head with the axe, and it's thought she was also raped. Now, there was a bloody handprint on a fence nearby the crime scene. And then all of a sudden, after Eula, all of this killing, all this madness just stopped, came to a screeching halt. Now, fast forward to February of 1886. On the east side of Austin, there was this saloon, and on one particular night, there was some guy who was just like, just really had had way too much to drink. Anyway, he dragged a girl named Julia out of the saloon and just proceeded to like beat on her and stuff. People heard her screaming from help and, ran over there to see like what in the heck is going on. A police officer and someone who worked at the saloon, they came over to, to break up everything so that they could, help this poor girl out, right? Now, the guy who was beating up the girl, his name was Ethan Elgin. And during all this scuffle and everything, the police officer like accidentally kind of shot him and, Ethan died. Now, when there was an autopsy being performed, there was something very interesting that was found. On one of his feet, a toe was missing. Now, during all this investigation of these murders that had been going on, something that was not reported to the press was, remember those footprints? That one of the feet in the footprints was missing a toe. Now, after all that murdering went on and everything, the Austin Police Department like tripled in size because people were freaked out. And so this whole missing toe thing is thought to be some sort of evidence. But what do? You can't like charge someone who's like dead or anything because the guy was killed by the police officer. So what do you do then? Now, meanwhile, there were other people that were charged with these other crimes, a series of 8 murders that happened. But what happened was their lawyer was basically able to use this evidence, the fact that this guy only, was missing a toe, and there were footprints that, had a toe missing. They were able to use that to get them off the hook. Was Ethan the murderer? I don't know. The thing is that like all this evidence that was collected, like police records and stuff, that's all gone. And I think that has to do with, people are trying to, make Austin look like pristine and everything was great. So they're not wanting this to get out. Another thought was there was an insane asylum, like some kind of hospital. I don't know what else to call it because I'm going by, historically what it was called. There was this hospital for the mentally ill. We'll just go with that. Okay. Just don't come at me. Don't come at me. I'm going by history here. Anyway, this was on the outskirts of Austin. So there was also this thought that, maybe somebody was escaping at night from there, coming into the city, committing a crime, getting cleaned up, and then going back into the hospital. But that's kind of a weird theory as far as I'm concerned. I mean, you're going to have to leave and travel somewhere and then go back. And that doesn't really make sense to me. It seems like the whole missing toe thing, that might be it. But I don't know. And now moving on, because, one of the things that I've always found very fascinating, okay, I've always had this fascination with serial killers. A lot of people do, right? I mean, it's just like, wow, how do these people do this stuff? Anyway, but what fascinates me sometimes is like the different names that they get and stuff. So how did this one get the name the Servant Girl Annihilator? I'm going to tell you. William Sidney Porter, who would become known as O. Henry, a famous writer, wrote this. Found and fearfully dull except for the frequent raids of the Servant Girl Annihilators, who make things lively in the dull hours of the night. So there's your fun serial killer fact thing. Anyway, that's how the Servant Girl Annihilator got his name. It's from O. Henry. Now, at the time when these murders went down and everything, it's not like they had the ability to investigate crimes the way they do today. Things were just, they were pretty crude. Let's just be honest. They were really pretty crude. Criminology didn't exist. You couldn't lift fingerprints. There was no way to get hair samples. All of that sort of stuff just wasn't part of the repertoire, Now, like I told you, all the police records disappeared. Well, from that hospital where the criminally insane or, whatever it was called, I don't know. But anyway, the records there also scrubbed. Now, some think that the Servant Girl Annihilator was actually Jack the Ripper. And so when you compare what happened to Austin to what happened in London in the Whitechapel district, I mean, there are some similarities. They both went after women. The women were killed. The women's bodies were posed. They were also raped. So there's like some things that are similar, but, were they the same person? I really don't think there's any way to say definitively one way or the other. But I think it's interesting to extrapolate and theorize and all that sort of stuff. But the thing that I find interesting is just like, when these murders happened in Austin, they started all of a sudden and then just poof, done, ended as well. So was it Ethan or was it someone else? Was it someone who had been in the hospital? I don't know. What do you think? Okay, if there is some crime like that happened, especially in Texas, because this is called, Deep in the Crime of Texas, even though I'm discussing some things that don't happen in Texas and some things might be kind of crime, might be kind of not exactly crime, but kind of just like weird stuff going on in the world or has gone on in the world, that sort of thing. Anyway, if there's something that you would like me to discuss that you think might be interesting, that other people might be finding fascinating in some way, let me know in the comments. Okay, when I do my MLM videos, I have a little sign off there. I feel very awkward of how to end this video. I don't, it's like I don't have like a catchphrase or anything. It's like, I don't know what to do. It's like, okay, well, okay, for one, this would be a great time for you to like hit that subscribe button if this kind of stuff, like resonates with you, and maybe give it a like. I think, yeah, give it a like, leave a comment too. I mean, all that sort of whatnot, do that because that does really help my stuff get seen more. And, as a creator on YouTube, you want your stuff to be seen. The world is a mad place right now. It's especially mad, just crazy. So I really hope you have everything that you need. I hope you're taking care of yourself, washing your hands, doing all that kind of stuff. Listen to what you're being told, take care of yourself, take care of the people that you care about, and I'll see you next time.